Welcome to the library. I'm Richard Wallace. I'm the chair of the Southborough Library Board of Trustees. Before we get started, I'd like to ask the other trustees that are here tonight to stand. Thank you. And I guess you know the drill. I'm going to turn this over to our moderator, John Wilson, who's going to tell you about the rules and the proceedings. Thank you.
Okay, good evening and welcome to the library for the 2017 Candidates Debate. My name is John Wilson. For those of you that don't know me, for those of you that don't know me, this is my permanent voice now, so it's as good as it's going to get. But I was the moderator in Southborough, the town meeting moderator for 24 years. And I also served on several other committees, including the Main Street Committee that got approved about 6 months ago. So I've been involved in different things for better or worse. I'm also the present veterans agent. So if there are any veterans or veterans' spouses that want to talk about veterans' benefits, I have office hours every Tuesday from 3 to 5:30. And strangely enough, my office is in the cemetery administration building. But the lights are on, so you can feel comfortable coming down. So let's go over some of the ground rules for tonight. First, I'm going to speak to the candidates and go over some of the rules in the audience, and then introduce the uncontested candidates and then the contested races. So candidates, your introductory statement should not be more than 2 minutes, and your closing statements not more than 1 minute. So this is a good practice for when if you get elected, for what you should do then. But the order of statements was determined by the position of the candidates on the ballot. And this is the ballot that you'll see when you go to vote a week from now. And let me just say, the polls are open on Tuesday, May 9th from 6:30 a.m. until 8 p.m. And the deadline to request an absentee ballot is Monday, May 8th at noontime, 12 p.m. Members of the public and candidates in uncontested races are going to be welcome to ask questions of candidates in contested races after the introductory statements. If you want to ask a question that goes for everybody, you must go to one of the microphones and please state your name and address like we do at town meeting. As I said, there's a time limit of 1 minute for asking a question, and please limit it to the 1 minute. We're very tight for time tonight with all these different races. You are allowed to ask a follow-up question while you're at the microphone. If it pertains to the content of your question, or if the answer was not responsive. Follow-up questions should be 30 seconds or less. 1 question and 1 follow-up per person until everyone else has had a chance at the microphone is the limit. Again, so candidates in contested races, please keep your responses to 2 minutes, and you may ask questions of each other as well. Our timers this evening, we do have very strict time limits and very determined timers. Betsy Rosenblum and Nicole DeBerre are over here to my right, to your left. They're no-nonsense people. They'll give you they will give you, when you're here at the table for candidates. That 20-second warning, and we expect you'll stay with it.
Anyone not see me?
And if you don't do it, there's a bell. Can you give us? Yeah, there's the bell.
This bell
Okay.
goes off when your time is
When your time is up.
So you'll see
Okay.
this, and then you'll hear
And like
the
I said, the time limits will be strictly enforced. So, the candidates in the uncontested races, in the order they appear, and please stand when your name is read. Paul Semino, running for moderator. Paul is here. Thomas Beaumont for the Board of Assessors. I don't know Thomas, so is Thomas here? Okay.
I don't think so.
Guess why? That's why I don't say him. Okay, now, Bill Boland is running for town clerk, but he's also unopposed in his running for Board of Commissioners of Trust Funds. I just saw Bill. I just saw him. There he is. Yeah. Nancy Sacco, Board of Health. Jane Davis, Board of Trustees of the Library. Jane. Amy Vacris, Board of Trustees of the Library. Amy. Paul Desmond, the School Committee. Paul's over here. Keturah Martin, School Committee. Over here. Paul Butker, Regional School Committee. It's Paul. They're all together over here. Well, and Paul Desmond again for the Regional School Committee. Don Morris for the Planning Board. I didn't see Don. Okay, so. Are there any other people running for office that are not on the list? Okay, thank you very much. So now, I go to the candidates in the contested races in the order they appear on the ballot, and I'll introduce them first, and then they will follow the instructions that I read earlier concerning opening statements, and then questions and closing statements. James F. Haggerty, 14 Maple Crest Drive, is here to my right, a candidate for the town clerk. And his opponent is William J. Boland, 35 East Main Street, candidate for town clerk. Okay, so I'd like to follow up and introduce again James Haggerty, who will make his opening statement. Mr. Haggerty.
Thank you, John. I also want to thank the library trustees and all of you for coming in tonight. And before I forget, I'd like to recognize my wife, Sally. Can you hear me now? Folks in the back? Okay, I'll speak louder like that. How's that?
Could you
Okay.
stand up? Would that be too hard?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, when the candidates are speaking, they can take the microphone and stand here so you can see them and hear them. Your 2 minutes will start again, Mr. Haggerty.
Can you hear me back there? Great, okay. I'm Jim Haggerty. Thank Mr. Wilson, the library trustees, and all of you coming here tonight. My wife Sally is here with us tonight. My background, I'm not from Southborough. Sally's the one that discovered it. I was an FBI agent for 29 years and got bounced around the country a bit, and we ended up here. Frankly, I remember my thought, Southborough? All I remember was going across the railroad tracks by the spa. I said, what do you see about this town that I don't know? And that's the truth, folks. That's the truth. We've been here for 25 years. We raised our 3 kids here that went through all the schools. Algonquin, they all went to the Naval Academy, and all 3 of our kids are on active duty in the Navy. Before I ran for town clerk, and if you'd talked to me 3 years ago that I was going to be a town clerk, wow, that would have not been what I thought I was doing. I was an advisor for 6 years. I was on the rec committee for 3 years. Still involved in the community. I've been coaching boys lacrosse, continue to do that for 12 years. I'm on the boosters at the high school, and I'm the assistant admissions coordinator for the Naval Academy for the greater Boston area. And I've been the town clerk, elected 2 years ago to fill the remaining 2 years of Paul Berry's term. What have I done in the past couple of years? I've reduced staffing from one position from 37 hours to 24, and I've taken on a lot of additional responsibilities, like taking over issuing transfer station stickers and some other things. So where do we go? Well, why would he leave with that? When is the last time that a town department said they voluntarily reduced staffing and took on extra responsibilities? That's the way we run the show there. We set up systems to make it easier for you, for those with the transfer station stickers. We run we initiated the senior center. You just drive in, we'll have the kid put it on the car for you. We set it up so you have no paperwork. For those of you who have dogs, we set it up that your dog license expires in the rabies. If you have a 3-year rabies vaccination, you get a 3-year dog license. Just trying to do things simpler. For those of you who went to the town meeting in October, you saw that we had a 20-minute wait or some time to come in. Now we cut that down to no wait in the spring. So we've done a lot of things to improve services to you, hopefully, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haggerty. Mr. Boland.
Thank you. My voice may sound a little like Mr. Wilson's temporarily during this because of my allergies, so I apologize if it does. Excuse me. My name is Bill Boland. I'm honored to have served the town of Southborough for 9 years previously as a member of the Board of Selectmen, a current elected trust fund commissioner for 6 years and many years on other boards. I'm a 4th generation of resident of Southborough. My wife Caitlin and I have 3 children that attended Southborough and Southborough schools at Algonquin. In my years of involvement with the town, I believe that I have a strong record of voting on issues that were in the best interest of the town. My experience in our government has made me very familiar with Mass General Law, town bylaws, and procedures and policies associated with the operation of the town and the town clerk's office, which I worked very closely with during my time as a selectman. Other than people in the clerk's office and Mr. Berry, I believe I know more about how the office operates than most people in town. Mr. Haggerty and his staff, excuse me, should certainly be applauded for making some much needed improvements to modernize the clerk's office since Mr. Berry's retirement. I decided to run for the clerk's position because of some of the things I saw that concerned me a little bit. While a candidate, Mr. Haggerty pledged openness and transparency, and although I believe he's sincere about that, I'm concerned about, I see things happening outside of office hours. Meetings are posted at night outside of normal business hours. Some candidates were able to take out nomination papers outside normal business hours. A standing policy for obtaining nomination papers at a deadline was dismissed because we had never accepted a law supposedly, yet we changed dog license fees for that were against what state law says. I'm also concerned about an appearance that the clerk is too active at town meeting on the floor, and the budget seems to be up about 50% over normal non-major election years. So I'll respect the time limit. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now it's time for questions and answers for the town clerk position. The microphone for these is here to my left. And we have a good sized crowd here. So put on your thinking caps and come up with a couple of questions.
Hello. My name is Betsy Rosenblum, also Beth Rosenblum, 5-star mayor.
Is that microphone on?
Can you hear me?
It's not on.
Hello? I can just talk louder than the damn microphone. Okay.
Is he going to work on that?
I don't know. Can you hear me? Yes. As a former elected library trustee, I have a keen interest in an issue that, to my knowledge, surfaced first in 2011, but it might have surfaced before then. regarding leaving elected boards elected versus making them appointed. And I just would ask both of the candidates to address, on a scale of 1 to 10, how strongly do you feel about leaving the elected clerk's office as an elected position? Thank you, gentlemen.
Mr. Haggerty, why don't you take that first, and then we'll go to Mr. Boland. And we'll do that on the back and forth on questions that come up.
About 2/3 of the positions in Massachusetts are elected versus appointed. And what has surprised me about being the clerk are the number of questions and issues that just deal with residents coming in to discuss things in the town where they felt slighted, or they don't know who to turn to, they don't feel they're getting a fair shake. That has surprised me. I didn't realize that that was the tone, but you can see a lot of things that have happened in the past year and the lawsuits and the rest of it. I guess that's a big deal. I do think this position be elected. If I'm not the one to choose, then you should absolutely choose someone else to be elected. I really do believe that. And I think it gets down to a balance of authority in the town. It is a big deal to say no, and I have to the selectmen on some things, just procedural things. I think it's important to have somebody that will look out for the residents. And when you walk into the town hall, it's different than town house than it was years ago. You can count on a couple of fingers the number of people that work there that actually live in the town. And at the end of the day, I treat everybody that comes to that counter as a neighbor. In fact, I was telling someone the other day, in the 2 years that I've been there and the thousands of people that I've come through, there are only 3 people that have come to the counter that I've thought, boy, I'm glad you're not my neighbor. And you will get a different level of service when I talk to people at the counter. Hey, how can we do this differently? Hey, do you have any thoughts about this? What would you feel like these stickers? How about the sticker on the outside versus the inside? I think you approach something differently when you have some skin in the game. And you do have skin in the game as a local official, as an appointed official. And guess what? It is extraordinarily difficult to get rid of an employee in public service. But as an elected official, every 3 years, you get to do a
20
performance
seconds.
appraisal. So, yes, I do think it matters, and I would recommend that you continue to have this as an elected official.
Mr. Boland,
Do we
same
sit?
question.
Do we sit during this, or do we stand again? I'm not.
Well, just sit. It was the introductory statements that I thought would be best, but you can do it whichever way.
I'll stand if it's easier for people. I believe that the position should be elected. It's been that way for a long time. We had a referendum at town meeting a few years ago. People may have felt differently because they thought it might have been a push to push Mr. Berry out after 40 plus years. They voted to keep it elected. Things have changed now. It's never been a full-time position. So we may want to consider looking at actually codifying that and making it a full-time position, or leave it the way it is. There are a lot of different things that we can consider as we go on, with some changes after many years with the same person. And I'd be in favor of looking into that. But the one thing I do agree with, it should remain as an elected position, but it's up to the residents.
So my
Thank you. Follow-up?
for Mr. Boland, if you were to be elected to this position and legislation were to come before the voters to have this become an appointed position, you would oppose that publicly?
Unless I saw that everything in it made sense to go in that direction now, yes, I would oppose it.
Thank you, Jim.
Mr. Savas.
Sam Stivers, 7 Presidential Drive. Question for Mr. Haggerty. Mr. Boland made some statements about alleged shortcomings in terms of town clerks.
Can everybody hear? Why don't you come up here, Mr. Stivers, and pose the question, because that doesn't work.
Sam Stivers, Presidential Drive. Mr. Boland made some statements about possible shortcomings in terms of process in the town clerk's office, which I think are significant, and I'd be interested in hearing Mr. Haggerty's response to that.
Well, I don't think
Mr. Haggerty.
I'd do it in 2 minutes, because I took 5 different categories of notes here. But as far as one thing, posting meetings out, well, let's back up a bit here. 2 of the things that Mr. Boland addressed were office hours, standard office hours. Well, I got news for you. There is no such thing as standard office hours for the clerk. I could be at a grocery store in Marlborough and somebody could go up and serve me papers, and you've served the town. So you own it. It's not 8:15 to 5. If I am at my desk, and I'm typically at my desk at 6:45 every morning, and I open my email, and I have a request to post a public meeting, I'm going to post that meeting. If I am, and the way the process works, so you understand this, we have an email account called Meetings, and the way we accept a meeting request from a board or committee is you email that account. You don't deliver any paper to us, and that gets forwarded to the 3 people in the department. Then you go through the process from there. So if I'm sitting at my desk at 7 o'clock at night and an email comes in, I'm going to take that email and I'm going to post it. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing nefarious about that. That's just, to me, that's just common sense. You're not giving anyone an advantage over anybody else. I mean, what are you really doing here? You're giving an elected or appointed board or committee an opportunity to meet. Why wouldn't you help them? I mean, listen, I've been at the Dunkin' Donuts at the transfer station on a Saturday and heard people complaining that they tried to go to the dump transfer station for with a temporary pass they did have when they were turned away. And I turned around and said, well, I'm the town clerk. What's going on? And they tell me. I said, well, I remember telling a guy a couple weeks ago, I was going to the cleaners to get the laundry. Why don't you follow me back to the town hall? I'll open up and I'll give you a temporary sticker. Is that side of town office? Of course it is. I mean, I don't see a downside to that. Why wouldn't I help somebody? Early voting, here's a funny story, helping someone I didn't even know. Early voting was an incredible amount of time for us, extra time, and on a Friday.
20 seconds.
I left about 2 o'clock, which is early for me on a Friday. And I got a really hostile, sarcastic, nasty message from a guy new to town that came in to vote at 2 in the afternoon and the office is closed. I bet you're home resting and this and that. Well, I got that message at 6:30 Saturday morning when I came into work. I called him right up, woke him up. I said, hey, I got your message, just wanted to discuss with you. I said, I'm down the town house right now. Early voting is ended, but if you want to come down here, you can vote absentee. He said, well, I can't come down till tomorrow, I'm working. I said, I'll be here Sunday as well. Here's my cell phone number. To me, yeah, that's your work, helping your neighbors.
Okay, that's it. Any more questions? Okay. Ryan, you just had a quick message for everybody.
Hi everyone, my name is Ryan Donovan, I'm the library director. I just want to encourage everyone when you come up to ask questions, see how close I am to the mic. Please get that close. Get uncomfortably close and we can hear you, okay? Thank you.
Mrs. Reynolds, let's see how you do.
Can I try it out?
Yes.
Okay, Claire Reynolds,
You're not close enough. No.
closer. Oh, okay. All right. I just never even thought I even needed one. So my question is, Mr. Boland, since you seem to think that this is a part-time job, and you already have a full-time job, can you just explain how you would do both of them?
Mr. Boland.
Sure, the same way that Mr. Berry had done it over the years. There's nothing that says it's a 40-hour-a-week job. Put in the amount of time that's required to get the job done and do the job. I wouldn't be working 60 hours a week or whatever else. There's a staff there that is more than capable of taking care of things in the office. The assistant has 15 years or so experience in doing that. You know, if the town decides they want to make it a full-time job, then by all means I'd have to adjust and see if that job is still for me, or perhaps leave my other job. But I'm more than convinced that I can do what's required of the job.
So just to be clear, you would still be, if you were elected, you would still be keeping your full-time job?
At this point, I would say so. There was just a significant increase in the salary that might cause me to change my mind, but I wouldn't anticipate taking that salary based on the hours I would anticipate working.
Good. Mr. Robbins.
Good evening, Michael Robbins, 47 Deerfoot Road. Just a quick question with respect to notices again. As a new, again, resident, I've had a challenge trying to determine when a meeting is. Like, I constantly have to check the town's website to see, like, oh, is there a meeting today? Like, I didn't know. Like, I'm constantly checking the website because I feel like the meetings just can come fast and furious as part instead of a set schedule. Are there any plans, or do either of you have plans to have set meetings for whether it's zoning, planning, so there can be some consistency?
Mr. Boland, take this one first, please.
Sure. The only set meetings that I could have would be a meeting of the actual committee I'm elected to, the trust fund committee. That has to vary depending on, we get residents who submit applications for help in needy situations. We tend to normally meet early in the morning. That's convenient to the people who are applying to us. But we always give 48 hours notice for that. For the other committees, that's up to them. Traditionally, selectmen meet on Tuesday nights. Planning board meets on Monday nights. Some of the other boards meet Wednesday or Thursday nights. And it's difficult. I'm told you can sign up for emails that will send you information on relative things. I've never done it, so I can't tell if it actually works. But one thing that some towns do that I would investigate if it's possible and economically feasible, there's an online system for being able to post meetings that some are trying out. And if that's something that would work, and then there's an area to look and all these meetings are posted, I'd consider that.
Mr. Haggerty.
That online meeting posting thing that Mr. Boland referred to has been up in place for 2 years. If you go to the home page of the town website, you'll see the calendar right-hand side. All the meetings are there. Click on it, and you'll see the agendas. The town clerk's office puts that up. As far as the question about the meetings, the open meeting law of the state of Massachusetts requires that meetings be posted at least the agenda be posted at least 48 hours in advance of the meeting. And that is complied with. That's something we hold people's feet to the fire on. If it comes in a minute after the 48 hours, it's not getting posted. That's not going to happen. And I have said no to people several times, regrettably. But you bring up an interesting point. One of the things that boards and committees can do, and I have recommended to them, and I would absolutely help them do, is they can post a listing of when they're going to have scheduled meetings on an issue, and they can post it in advance. Where you run into problems, however, is when you get into quasi-adjudicatory boards like Concom, Planning, and ZBA, and they have a legal requirement not only to post to apply with the open meeting law for the 48-hour public notice, but they also have legal requirements to post hearing notices. So you may see an agenda, say, for the planning board, where they'll have a meeting starting, say, at 7 o'clock, but they'll have a scheduled hearing at 7:15, 7:30, 8 o'clock. All those they have to meet certain legal requirements as to when those are posted. So it gets a bit complicated for them. But there's absolutely no reason why they can't say, we expect to have these meetings over the next 3 months on these topics as a general heads up. It doesn't satisfy the open meeting law. It's not intended to be that, but it's to alert people that, hey, they're going to be talking about Park Central, they're going to be talking about Maple Crest Drive, whatever. That absolutely can be done, and we can help them do that.
20 seconds, okay. That's it. Any other questions? Okay, closing statements by the candidates. Mr. Haggerty. Oh, and by the way, we have some 4 seats down here that very desirable seats for you folks. They're comfortable. Mr. Haggerty.
Again, thank you for coming here. I wish there was 100 times as many people here, but that's the way it is. I had a former boss in the FBI, and he had a sign on his office that read, "Some people think change is a 4-letter word." And I got to tell you, in town government, that is a pretty pervasive, it's a threatening thing to introduce change. I am not made that way. I am someone who's always looking to change and improve things. Look, I've been to 8 other town meetings this year to see how they do things. I went to Westborough to see they use electronic voting. They spent $35,000 a year to rent these clickers for 2 meetings. Oh my God, I just can't believe why they would do that. That's beyond me. I've gone to 5 other towns to watch how they run their elections, and that's one of the reasons we have this electronic check-in at the town meetings. We're able to do that. Look, Jim Haggerty doesn't have a brain, lightning hit me and come up with a good idea. There's a number of election workers that are here, and they will tell you that I've asked every one of them, hey, is there a way we can improve this process? How can we do this better? Even about having fresh muffins in the morning. We're asking people to get there at 5:45 in the morning, some say till 10 o'clock at night. Yeah, we can go to Morrow's and have them get some fresh muffins for us. But process, procedures, they're the ones that have to do it. A lot of you people have come to the counter, hey, I've asked you, would you be in favor of us leaving the dump stickers on the outside of the car down from bad?
Okay.
Listen, here's the deal.
Time is up.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Bowles.
Thank you. I appreciate your time tonight. I'm not against change. I think change is good. As I say, I think Mr. Haggerty and the staff have done a great job changing some things over there. But I think some things or maybe taking on a little more. My personal opinion, the dump stickers are there, that's great. But then as far as where stickers go, what happens with enforcement and other things, that belongs with the DPW, not in the clerk's office. I think in some areas I've seen kind of a little bit of a breakdown in communications and cooperation within departments in town, and I would strive to try and rebuild that and make sure that people are doing what they're responsibility for, and I wouldn't be trying to get involved in those areas. So there are some different things that I would try to do other than what's being done now, but I would be open and transparent, and would ask for your vote on Tuesday, May 9th. Thank you.
So now we thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. You're dismissed. Okay. Board of Selectmen, why don't you come up and sit in the order in which I called you up, which is on the menu, on the list. So, Dan Calenda, sit here in this. Thank you. This seat. Lisa Braccio, to Dan's right. Yes. Sam Stivers, the center. David Bowery in the next seat, and John Wood in the last seat.
Always last with a W.
I know. Okay, so now we have the 5 candidates for Board of Selectmen, as I just named them: Daniel Calenda, Lisa Braccio, Sam Stivers, David Barry, and John Wood. So I'll introduce them now to give their 2-minute opening statements. First one is Daniel L. Calenda of 7 Blendon Woods Road. Mr. Calenda.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to see such a great crowd. And so I am your current selectman. I've been fortunate to be a selectman for the last 2 terms. I also serve on your regional school committee with Mr. Budka, who's here tonight, and have been fortunate to do that for a couple of terms as well. I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, went to Boston College, met my wife there. She's from the Newton area, and you know, I was welcomed into the family by the matriarch of that family, Kathy's aunt, who said to me, "Dan, congratulations to your engagement to young Catherine. You understand she's not leaving the Commonwealth." So I have been here ever since and have loved it. We actually drove out. We heard about this great golf course called Stony Brook, and we drove out from Newton, where we were staying, and found that golf course, loved it, found a Main Street, found a Century 21, and found a house. So we've been here for quite a while, and I love this town. It's one of the reasons why I serve this town. I'm also Lieutenant Colonel in the United States Army Reserve JAG Corps. I've done that for 18 years. It's taken me to some fun-filled places like Iraq, the Congo 3 times, Uganda once, and I'm heading this weekend to a lovely place called Mauritania. And I say that facetiously. It's not a lovely place at all. But I will tell you this, they love training with the Americans, and I'm proud to do it. That does take time away from my family, from my responsibilities here, but I can guarantee you I have more than enough energy to do all that I do. And I ask for your consideration for your vote on Tuesday, May 9th. Thank you.
Thank you. The next candidate is Lisa M. Braccio of 13 Oregon Road. Ms. Braccio.
Good evening. Thank you to the library trustees, our moderator John Wilson and Ryan Donovan, and you the citizens for turning out tonight. Here's why I'm qualified to be selectman. Many people know me through one facet of my contributions in this town or another. To one, I'm the founder of the Care Package Drive for Troops that we did. To another, the current chair of the Open Space Preservation Commission and vice chair of the St. Mark's Golf Course Master Plan Committee, or room mom and volunteer from school. These varied facets are what gives me the experience to be an effective selectman to all Southborough citizens. I bring varied experiences that have enabled me to work with diverse groups of people, see issues from different viewpoints, and have a successful track record of bringing people together to achieve a common goal. I have a background in business and finance, which will be an asset as the town faces the implementation of the large capital projects recently approved by town meeting. I have served the town proudly for volunteering for 12 years on town committees and boards, also 5 years on the Southborough Community Emergency Response Team, Southborough Emergency Planning Committee, as well as volunteered with the Council on Aging to address their needs. I've been recognized at the national, state, and local level for my commitment to public service. I was honored to receive the Commander's Award for Public Service in 2014. It is the 4th highest public service decoration to a civilian from the United States Department of the Army. I have also received accommodations from the Governor, Senate, House of Representatives, Congressman, Department of Veterans Affairs, and other veterans organizations. I was proudly one of 100 women recognized by the state as an unsung heroine in 2009. Soon, Southborough will be undertaking several large and complex projects, including the Main Street reconstruction and the public safety complex. It is imperative for the success of these projects that Southborough citizens have trust in the Board of Selectmen to listen to them and work for them and be fiscally responsible. Thank you for the opportunity to share my qualifications with you. I'm hopeful to get your support on May 9th, and I look forward to being your voice. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Sam R. Stivers, 7 Presidential Drive. Mr. Stivers.
Thank you, John, and thanks again to the library trustees and staff to provide this opportunity. Sam Stivers, I'm a 20-year resident of Southborough, served for the last 13 years on a number of boards and committees, most currently with the advisory committee. I'm going to take a little different tack, suggest that for folks interested in more details about my background, you look at my website, which is www.samforselectmen.com. I think it's useful to talk about the issues here. And for me, the questions are, logical questions are, why am I running? 3 reasons. I care a lot about Southborough's future. I think the selectmen certainly have a huge impact on that. I can help town government be effective because of my 30 years of business experience in terms of managing organizations that are a lot bigger than this one, but you need to understand how to plan, how to strategically plan, how to operationalize things and get things done. I bring a fresh, independent view to town issues. Why vote for me? 1, I have a detailed understanding of town government activities through my participation in a variety of committees over the last 13 years or so here. I'm independent without conflicts of interest or obligations to special interest groups. I'm always ready to listen, and I work hard to understand all sides of an issue, and I think my track record demonstrates that. I deal effectively with complex issues, and I find solutions to balance competing views on those issues, as there always are. And most important, I'll devote the time and effort necessary to do the job well. What important issues do I want to address? As Lisa commented, we spend $50 million a year on the town. We're going to spend another $30+ million on the 2 big projects, Main Street and the public safety building. And I think you need to have some business experience in terms of managing those kinds of budgets. I want to develop creative strategies for relieving fiscal pressures. I want to improve coordination between town boards and committees. I want to create additional housing opportunities for residents, particularly young families and seniors, which I think we're short on. And I want to find ways to support improved cultural, social, open space, and recreational amenities. I ask for your support on May 9th. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce David W. Barry, 22 Main Street. Mr. Barry.
Thank you. I nearly didn't make it. I was caught in traffic from Boston, but thankfully I did. So I haven't timed myself. I have to see, I'll probably blow this. Anyway, you know, I was first a selectman in 1995, and I found my old notes, interesting enough. So I'm very, very brief. Oh, I'm David Parry. I'm 22 Main Street, Southborough, right downtown opposite the police station. I was your selectman for 9 years. I've been here 35 years. I have a daughter who's now working in London. She went to the local schools. My wife died 17 years ago, unfortunately. I plan to stay here. I was born in Darjeeling, India. During World War II, I went to Cambridge, University of England, Harvard University, and Columbia University. I worked for multiple state agencies in New York, Mass, and most recently, City of Marlborough, the first and only city planner. They don't have one now, which is quite incredible to me. I'm now in private practice. I have no clients in Southborough. I have no intention to. I serve no developers in Southborough. I have no conflict of interest, and I will abide by that. I was elected to the planning board 2 terms and selectman 3 terms. I care deeply about our town. I love it here. That's why I'm living here. My goal is to protect its beauty, its character, and its values, and its heritage. I'll be fair, open, transparent. I will work hard for you. Now let me go back to 1995. How many seconds do I have left?
Well, just keep talking.
Okay, all right,
You're
okay.
doing fine.
Okay, good, okay. Just one fair warning. 1995 is interesting. I found my own notes. The population of the town was 2,500. It had increased 75% since I moved into town in 1982, and that was considered gigantic. And the issues were amazing. The issue was the growth is too fast. 75% over 10 years.
Now you have 20 seconds.
Okay. Big projects, MBTA, MWRA, Chapter 40B, like we have right now, up Flag Road, more schools, we needed them all. Were they all solved? Every one of them was solved. They all seemed gigantic and unsolvable. We solved all of them. Just like we have issues today, they're all solvable with the right people in leadership with maximum citizen participation. I thank you all, and I hope to be our next selectman. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce John Wood, 10 Gilmore Road. Mr. Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Thank you to the Library Board of Trustees and everybody for coming tonight. And boy, does 2 minutes go by quick, so I'm going to try to read fast. My name is John Wood. I'm asking your support for candidacy as seat of selectman.
Can you hear back?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
I'm a
keep it up
32-year
close to your mouth. Yeah.
I'm a 32-year resident of Southborough. I've been witness to many changes within the town. At no time, more than ever, do I believe that our town is at a critical crossroad where decisions that we made by our Board of Selectmen have such far-reaching impacts for generations to come. Issues such as the impending Main Street project, preservation of St. Mark's Golf Course, and the construction of a new public safety complex will have material emotional impact on many of our town residents. As such, I believe strongly that those who will be making the decision with regard to these projects should not do so lightly. Each of these projects in which decisions regard to people have worked so tirelessly, yes, I'm not going to try this. So I've been here for 32 years. My wife's a 4th generation townie. My kids are 5th generation townies. They're in the back there. I've been on the advisory committee since 2010. I was chair of it from 2012 through 14. I was on the public safety study committee for the last 2 years, and I think that was a great board that showed how people can work together on. I moved here from Wayland at 18, and I've been here ever since. I love this town. I think that, wait a minute, sorry, brain fart. You know what? I'm so sorry. I get so nervous up here. It's incredible. So,
Take your time.
I got 2 minutes. I can't. I want to support economic development in the town, especially on Route 9. I'd like to see us be able to try to get rid of the residential tax burden by bringing in more commercial tax. So that way we can keep our seniors here. We can try to keep people like me here. My kids are gone. We're pennies on the dollar. For that, I ask for your support. And I'm sorry, I really bombed that.
Okay. So on your plan, you had said, Betsy, that we'd take a 10-minute break. Do you still want to do that or go to questions?
That was more to take a break when we've been doing this for about an hour.
Yeah, okay.
So I would take a question or
Okay.
two, and then we can break at 7:35 or so.
Okay.
Thank you.
So it's time for questions for the selectmen candidates. The microphone remains over here to my left. Are there anybody with a question? Desiree.
Desiree Asselbeacon, 137 Woodland Road. I'm close enough, aren't I? The biggest issue in town right now is not Park Central. It's not public safety. It isn't even fiscal constraints. The biggest issue our town is facing is the complete lack of regard for common human decency and proper public decorum. I often passionately question policy decisions among our town boards. However, at the end of the day and the end of the debate, I respect the process and have been known to have a laugh or two with my political foes. Unfortunately, this doesn't seem to be the case for many others questioning controversial issues. Over the past 2 years, I have seen the very fabric of our town be torn apart. Whether it's disagreement on Park Central or Flag Road, medical marijuana, the planning board versus the ZBA, or a recent police call to the senior center during a public works meeting on a water tank. When is our town going to attempt to tone down the unprecedented hostility?
20 seconds to go.
Sure.
Well, it's all, yeah.
No, if elected.
Yeah, give it 10 seconds more, please, and then, go ahead.
Okay, I'm just asking the question. Yeah, that's fine. If elected, what do you plan to do to improve the tone and environment of public discourse? What will you do specifically to repair us to a peaceful way while allowing citizens the right to voice their concerns?
Is that to anybody in particular, or to everybody? All of them. Okay? Well, let's start with Mr. Kalenda.
He said to just keep it on the table, so.
Oh, all right. I'm a little fella, so I guess we have to keep this on the table. So I'll sit up straight. Thank you for the question, Desiree. And honestly, it's one of the reasons why I chose very late to run for re-election. I wasn't going to. When I first got back from Iraq, I wanted to participate in my democracy more than I ever have. And I said, you know what, I'm going to run for office, and I did. And I really enjoyed it, especially that first term. Boards and committees were collegial. We worked great together. Since then, it has unfortunately gotten ugly. I actually introduced some public comment guidelines solely to bring some decency back into our public discourse. I also, I go to St. Matthew's every weekend and I listen to Father Flynn. I love that man. He is a wonderful priest. And he said, you know what we need to do? It's a very simple message. Let's spread some good cheer. And I carry that with me, and I encourage everyone, because we have had people who have unfortunately resigned from great, positions of authority. Mr. Rooney was the subject to an awful ethics complaint against him. It was a political hit job against a wonderful man, and he had enough, and he resigned. And we lost a great person, a great man, a great volunteer. We had just this last town meeting, we have had recall petitions put forth. Recall petitions. We have enough trouble getting people to come to serve
20 seconds.
As volunteers. And instead, we had recall petitions. And you may be told that it was just a great idea that the petitioners had one day of, we were sitting around a coffee shop in Shazam. We thought, we're missing a process here in Southborough. Let's have a recall petition. No. I'm confident for other reasons. We need to get back to spreading some good cheer.
Thank you. Ms. Bradshaw.
Thank you, Desiree, for the question. I appreciate it. This also was one of the reasons I chose to run for selectman. I sat on the St. Mark's Golf Course Master Plan Committee, and I commend that committee for being such a very diverse group and being able to come to some great consensus. While I sat on that committee, one of the questions we heard repeatedly at the majority of our meetings were that people felt there was no other forum or another opportunity for them to speak. That was concerning to me. We gave them that opportunity. We heard that from boards and committees as well. So at that point I decided, you know what, with all the discourse that's going on, and I'll tell you what is very concerning to go to some of the meetings and to see the level of discourse in this town. In the years I've been here, it's changed dramatically. I mean, people need to start we need to start somewhere, and I guess that's one of the things I'm running on. While there is public comment allowed at the selectmen's meeting, I don't think it goes far enough. If you have a question and you want it answered, the public comment doesn't allow for the opportunity for the selectmen to have a dialogue or a debate with you, unless they so choose to. And I think we need to do something better for the citizens to know that your voice is heard. I think there are processes that we can put in place to make that happen. I think it's tough because you are a selectman and your job is to the town and the town business before it, but you can never lose sight of the people and people that elect you and the people that you serve. So there are processes, and I want to work towards those processes, Desiree, and I think with great input from members of the community as well that have expertise in this, I think if we create another process that the citizens have another avenue to be able to get to their selectmen outside of a selectmen's meeting, I think that will certainly help, and it might help some of the feelings of people not feeling acknowledged and respected.
10
Thank you.
seconds. Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Stavis. Same question.
Thank you. A couple of comments, and I'll address Ms. Asselbekian's specific question because I think that's an important thing specifically. What should we do? Unfortunately, we do seem to have lost some trust in government, and I think that is sadly something that is quickly lost and it's hard to regain. So I think the process is long and slow. I think there are a number of things that the selectmen can do, following on Ms. Braccio's comment, to encourage more public comment at selectmen's meetings. Mr. Kalenda, in fact, had proposed to limit that previously. Fortunately, his colleagues overrode that suggestion for public comment. Excuse me, this is my turn here, sir. Second, I think that we need to work harder in terms of making information available at board meetings. The Public Works Planning Board meeting that Ms. Asselbekian referred to, the issue there, as I understand it, was that there was a new report available that the public had not had access to. Obviously, that creates some pressure and concern on the public's part, and so I think we need to work harder to make materials available before meetings so people get the understanding they need to participate in those discussions and don't feel like information is being withheld. And I think there's still a number of boards that aren't doing as effective a job of that as they need to be, and it's something that's pretty simple administratively to take care of. I think that there needs to be other ways to
Can you
provide
hear back
communication.
there?
Sorry,
I can't hear in the back.
Sorry, needs to be other ways to provide communication. If elected, one of the things I'm considering doing is spending some time at the transfer station on Saturday mornings to be available to talk to folks. I think just simply being available to listen through another mechanism is something that could be useful to give people an avenue to express concerns, to make suggestions, and I think we need to be alert in many ways to improve that
20
communication.
seconds. 20 seconds.
Over time, I think that will begin to alleviate the concerns that we're seeing here. It is unfortunate, and I think we need to work hard on making an improvement. Thank you.
Mr. Perry.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, well, this all comes down to meaningful citizen participation, which has been lacking on project after project here until people scream loud enough, and then finally the boards or the selectmen in many cases respond, and it's always nearly all too late. I have a classic case for you, Main Street. Well, it's hunger for state money. When you damn the rules, if the state comes here and has to build this great big highway through it with these, obnoxious rules which apply to Hudson and Marlborough, when we have to live with it, well, so what? It's free, it's $7 million, let's take it. That is not the way to plan a community. That's why a lot of people got fed up and had to scream and shout until people finally paid attention, and the selectmen, and I thank them for it, finally woke up and created a working group where residents were in charge and not DPW. And this is what it all comes down to. Residents have to be in charge of the projects, especially the public finance projects. Now, I've had a lot of experience in this. I work for New York State Urban Development Corporation, which you go to Manhattan or upstate Buffalo, you'll see nearly every project in New York State is built by the origin of what they call the Urban Development Corporation, UDC. You name it. All the convention centers, the bridges and everything are all done under the subsidiary powers of that agency. It had immense powers. It could eminent domain, could take property eminent domain, it was its own bank, it could float bonds, it could do anything it wanted. It was extremely threatening. When we went into a community and said, well, we're going to build subsidized housing here because you need it, because that's our job. Martin Luther King had been murdered, and our job was to provide, 20 seconds, okay. So You know, what do we do? The whole key was citizen participation. You get them to understand the problem. You educate them, bring them forward. You put them in charge. So that is the solution to these problems. And the problem of Park Central and so forth is residents have not had enough control. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Perry. Mr. Wood.
I agree with everybody. This is probably the most contentious I've ever seen this town in my life. And I think the easiest way is that we teach our kids not to be bullies. I'd like to start and lead by example and stop being bullies. Right now, the fact that we've got 5 people up here running for selectmen with some of the comments that have been made on different things towards other people, Mr. Rooney and Mrs. Faniff, I think that's wrong. We need to stop that. I think we can do it by increasing transparency between the boards, more communication between the boards, more communication with the public. I'm fortunate enough to have served on the advisory committee as chair, and when I took over, they had the Shutterfly site in. I started CCing all the emails on the Shutterfly site, so that's probably one of the most open committees out there now. On the public safety, we did a great job. We communicated with all the other boards. We communicated with the selectmen. I think that we had a lot of open meetings. Everything was posted. So the public knew what was going on and came with it. And I think that was probably the most successful presentation that's gone through town meeting in a while. And I'm pretty proud of that. So again, I think if everybody just treats everybody with respect and kindness like we're supposed to, I think that'll go a long way. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Galenda. We're going to go to Mr. Galenda for his retort, then you. We have another questioner, and then you.
So,
yeah, go ahead, and then back to you, Desiree, okay?
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. So I introduced the public comment guidelines for our meetings solely to ensure that public comment was expressed decency towards one another. Because we had incidents where people got up during public comment and slandered employees, other board members, questioned their ethics. That's not what public comment is about. So I'm a lawyer. I love a great debate. We have outstanding debate during our meetings. Come to one every other Tuesday. It's lively, it's free, it's good fun. And then when public comment comes, that's a time for the public to bring in information, not on a board agenda. It's not supposed to be debated, because you can run afoul of public open meeting laws if you start debating and having discussions about issues that were not on the agenda. Public comment is a time to bring issues to the public's attention that folks don't otherwise know, like a great care package drive going on or things of that nature. That's what public comment is about. I simply wanted to make sure it was good, decent, honest public comment, not take the microphone and slander a fellow resident who's not there to defend themselves. We had good debate, as we always do on this board. Mr. Semino is here, Mr. Shea is here tonight. We had great debate on that, and you know what? We unanimously supported it. Of course, when you first introduce something, I don't have all the answers. I introduced a concept, we debated it. It was solely about decency. We made a few edits, not that many, and we unanimously approved it. So, Ms. Hasselbekian, that's one of the ways, including trying to spread some good cheer and bringing down the level of rhetoric that I'd like to see in all of our boards and committees.
Okay. Ms. Hasselbeck?
I was simply going to ask Mr. Kalenda if he sees the need to expand that policy to other boards and committees in town.
So,
thank you.
It's a great point, if I may, sir.
Sure.
One of the redrafts that we did as a board is to ensure that it was applicable to all of our boards and committees. So perfect. I should have explained that. Thank you. That's exactly right. It pertains to all of our boards and committees.
Okay. Yes.
Kathy Cook, 11 Greystone Way. I actually don't agree with the previous question as far as what the most important matter in front of the town is. I still think it's Park Central. I think Park Central's caused a lot of what she brought up. I don't disagree we've got a problem with the way people are talking to each other, but I still think Park Central has caused a lot of this. So I'd like for each candidate to please, one at a time, express your opinion on the Park Central project and what you if you happen to oppose it, what you believe is still left that you can do as a Board of Selectmen member to try to do something about the project so that it will be much more, make people happier that live over there, and try to address the fundamental issues that are being brought to you from the people that live there.
Okay. Let's start with Ms. Braccio.
Again, thank you. I think that's a really great question, and I think it's something that's very pertinent to what's going on in town right now. As far as Park Central goes itself, the project is in the appeal process, and that is up to the courts to decide. It is not up to this Board of Selectmen to decide. But what this Board of Selectmen should be doing, it should be currently working with the citizens to come up with a viable solution to the traffic situation on Flag Road. Currently, the state, my understanding is that the state has denied access from this project onto Route 9. So you're talking 3,000 cars going down a scenic, narrow road in our town. That affects a lot of the homes. If that was my home, I would be concerned. I don't necessarily believe that at this point that shutting off Flag Road is the way to go. I think there's a lot of other options out there that haven't been explored. I think there should be some type of Flag Road Master Plan Committee that can come together and pull of the best expertise in this town. We have amazingly smart citizens in this town. Why we are not utilizing them more is beyond me. I think we need to do that, and I need to come up with some solutions before that is our final solution. As far as I know, that's the only one on the table at this point, and I don't think that does a service to any of our citizens. I don't think it does a service to the developer and the project either, but I think at this point we need to focus on what's best for our citizens, and we shouldn't be waiting to do this. This should be starting now, people. Well, this is in court, because no matter what the outcome of that is, if we have a plan in place that will be able to potentially help the neighborhood and be better for the town, not just the neighborhood, because these 3,000 cars are going down the feeder road. It is not just Flag Road. We are talking Deerfoot Road, Clifford Road, Main Street are going to see impacts from this. So we need to be proactive now.
Seconds.
Thank you. And try to come up with a solution. And I think using our citizens is the best way to do that. Thank you.
Mr. Stivers.
I agree with a lot of what Ms. Braccio says. I think that we can't wait for a decision from the courts on it. We need to plan and prepare. Bottom line for me is I think that the public safety related traffic issues are substantial and haven't been effectively dealt with. I think it is certainly worth exploring other alternatives. I'm hard pressed to see a good solution at this point, but I think it's certainly worth looking for. And if in fact nothing else comes up, I am in favor of closing Flag Road at the end of it as a last step in the process to protect the public safety on that road. Thank you.
Mr. Perry.
Park Central. I mean, the classic major blunder of our town. But who's responsible? We are. We are responsible because we didn't have 10% affordable housing. All of us are responsible. This was, when I was first selectman, Affordable Housing Committee. Why didn't we create more affordable housing? We didn't. So, that's why. Is Mr. DePietri at fault? No, he isn't. He came in to do what needs to be done to provide affordable housing in this town. We need 10%. If you hit the 10% threshold, you're protected. If you don't have 10%, you're vulnerable. Anywhere, anytime, anyhow, and there's nothing, practically nothing, other than serious public safety which can prevent a developer from building 40B, Chapter 40B housing if you don't meet 10%. And by the way, Marlborough does, and lots of other towns do, but we don't. So thankfully, Bob Moss, south of Route 9, provided a lot of it, but not enough of it, unfortunately. If we'd been smart, we would have told him to buy a vacant building, and he could have provided all of it 5 years ago. 100% of the 10% we could have gotten, we wouldn't have the Park Central. But DePietri's not at fault here. He's doing what we need to do, and we didn't do it. So don't blame him for coming in with an application to provide the 10%. Now it's the ZBA fault, because they changed the 40B, for sale, which you get 25% credit for, to rental, which you get 100% credit for. So at one stroke, they solved the problem of getting over 10%. Are they at fault? I would say no, they're not. They did the right thing, because they got us potentially over the 10% if the state approves it. Now, the problem is the 40A, isn't it? because if the 40B is basically a slam dunk, because no one appealed it within 30 days. So the chances of overturning the 40B are minimal. The 40A is another matter, the private housing filling up the rest of the site. The problem there is our traffic consultant, the one we paid, said that Flag Road is adequate. There's the gigantic irony, you know, that we have to defend a case where our traffic consultant says the road's adequate. I have traffic solutions for that in mind, and they deal with Route 9. But we have to face up to the music and somehow deal with this traffic problem which is going to come down the pike. Whether we can defend... Am I up?
Yeah, you're up.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You'll get a chance.
All right.
You'll get another chance to finish your comment. Mr. Wood.
I sympathize with all the residents around the Park Central area. I agree with what Mr. Cybers said and Ms. Braccio said, that the safety issues in traffic there has not been addressed yet fully. I think that we should probably start meeting sooner than later with the residents, with the builder, with the state, whatever we need to do to try to get a compromise, because if this goes through, it's a reality. We got to do something. So I think the sooner the better.
Mr. Galenda, on this topic.
So clearly, Park Central has been one of the greatest challenges that has faced many in our community. The developer clearly has rights to develop land that he owns. The residents who live in that area clearly have a right to the quiet enjoyment of their homes, their property as well. So we need a solution. We don't have one yet. Closing Flag Road could very well have other repercussions that other people aren't going to like either in other parts of town. So am I opposed to it? It is in litigation, and it's going to be, you know, we'll find out if it even ever happens, and that may be a couple of years down the road, who knows. If it does happen, then we need to do our level best to mitigate any issue that is going to face those residents in that area. We as a board addressed that very issue and agreed unanimously, and it was and I commend Mr. Semino for helping lead that effort about if the developer and the state cannot fix it, we as the safety officers, the road safety officers in the town, are going to do everything within our power to do so.
Okay. Ms. Cook, did you have a follow-up, or are you all set?
So I was trying to get you five to do something simple, which is hard to do when you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, speak
I
into
wanted each of you to say, I'm for the project, I'm not for the project. It really, I think it would help this audience to understand where you're coming from before they cast their vote next week. So could we just do a poll real quick and find out whether you are for this project or whether you're against the project?
So you can each say I'm for it, or against it, or abstain. Go ahead. Ms. Braccio. We'll do the same sequence.
Well, I think there's more.
Go ahead.
Excuse me. I think there's more to the question than just if we support the project or not. I mean, to sit here with you today and say we do or we don't support the project, what does that serve going forward for the citizens of the town? I don't know enough about the project. Would I want it in my backyard? No. So I don't know if that answers your question. Do I feel for the citizens who are impacted by this project? Absolutely. And I would do anything that I could to help them.
The project's going to impact the whole town.
Well, of course it is.
So I understand that it's hard to say yes or no, but if the people who are going to vote for you understand that at least you would prefer not to have this project here, they may think that you're going to try harder to find every way you can to legally oppose the project. So that's all I'm trying to understand is, are you personally for this project or are you not for the project?
You don't have to answer.
Again, yeah, I prefer it not to be, the developer has a right to build, but at the same time, obviously, in a neighborhood with this close proximity, I would probably say, no, I would prefer it not. Thank you.
Mr. Stivers.
Given the current structure of the project, I do not support it. I think it's too intensive for that particular site as it's presently designed. Not to say that somebody couldn't come up with a better plan for it, but as it's presently designed and positioned, I don't think it's appropriate, and I would not be in favor of it.
Mr. Barry.
Well, of course I'm against the project. God, I mean, it's such an extraordinary. How can anyone be for such a thing, as such a colossal project, which is 10% of the whole town, town on one site designed for light industrial, which no one expected. And, it was supposed to have 20-foot, 200-foot buffers of landscape, and it has like 10-foot buffers of landscape. And you have a private deal with some residents, but no private deal with the rest. So some residents are fighting the other. It's an internal war going on up there. No big surprise, because, as again I say, we're partly responsible, but of course I'm against it. The thing is, what are you going to do about it? That's the problem. I do have certain things I intend to do about it. But in principle, obviously, I'm against it. It needs to be changed, and it needs to be solved.
Mr. Wood?
Again, I'm very sympathetic with the neighborhoods around there. I don't know enough about the project. I would not want it in my backyard. I think that there's still more to do to make it acceptable. But I can't say that I'm against somebody buying property, getting in his permits and doing it correctly and being able to do what he wants with it. Would I want it across the street from me? Absolutely not. So would I try to come up with a good solution for everybody? Absolutely. I don't know if that helps, so probably not.
Mr. Kalenda?
Thank you, Ryan. I think it would be a mistake for any sitting or hoped to be future selectmen to participate in a poll like that. As I stated before, the developer has every right to develop land that he owns. The citizens have every right to the quiet enjoyment of their property. It is our obligation. We serve both business owners as well as residents. In fact, the business owner is both a business owner in town and a resident. And so our obligation is, as a board of selectmen, I would not pigeonhole anyone. And I'm surprised that some have even gone so far as to state an opinion on something like that, especially while it's still in litigation, and especially while we have an obligation as selectmen to all of our residents, and that includes our business owners. And so my position remains as what the board has already voted unanimously. If the state and the developer don't mitigate those issues to the residents in that area, we will do everything in our power to do so ourselves.
Okay. All set. Marguerite?
John? Break time?
Well, why don't let's take these questions and then, what do you want to do?
Let's keep going.
Let's find out. Let's just keep trucking. Does everybody need a break, or do people want to keep going? How about you folks? No breaks.
We're gonna keep going,
Go,
guys.
keep chatting. Is the clock still working? Okay. Go ahead, Marguerite.
Okay, Marguerite Landry, Library Board of Trustees, but also citizen. A question for everyone. I think mostly the electorate is most of the electorate in Southborough feels that there's a big gap between what the committees are doing and their own voices. And where I get most of my political news is from my southborough.com in the comments section. Is there any way to draw on the huge amount of expertise that Southborough residents have in some kind of a chat room or exchange of ideas online that you would propose as select persons?
Well, let's start with Mr. Kalenda this time.
John, I think you should start. Be fair.
Where do you want to start, sir?
I'll go down there.
With you.
That's fine. Okay.
Thank you, sir. So, wonderful question. Absolutely, the more input, the better. We learn from input every time we have a Board of Selectmen meeting. Some of them we have 1 or 2 people come. It is rare that we have 10 or 15. We would love more input. Now, we all, 5 of us, represent all 10,000 plus in this town. All 5 of us have a pretty large network of people. They voted for us at least once. So, there are people that we communicate with often to learn from. But I would love any opportunity like that. to have greater awareness about what concerns are of people, whether it be online, in person at our meetings. I'm all for it. Thank you for the question.
Now, I don't know what you mean by unfair or fair, but why don't you go ahead?
No, I just thought you were going to go in.
Well, Mr. Calenda was last the last 3 times, so pay attention. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go. Okay, well, I mean, this all comes down, I totally agree. You know, where does one get one news from? It's you have to subscribe to, you know, if you're wise, you know, this web page, the town, southboroughtown.com has agendas coming up, which can be a bit of a drag because, you know, half the stuff you're not interested in, but you have to do that, number one. You know, so everyone should get on the subscription for the, whatever it's called, for the agendas, so at least you know what's coming up, which is very good, and they're printed in advance with packets. I'm all for that. But the thing is, the reality is that My Southborough is our newspaper, isn't it? And there's a little bit of a problem here. I'm not going to insult, you know, Beth Amelia, who does a fantastic job. But the trouble is the anonymity. That's the problem. All these damn comments from people who you don't know who. ABC, Mr. Joe, Jackass, or whatever it is. And they say all these unscrupulous lies on there because they can get away with it, because no one knows who they are. This is the blooming problem. If people had to identify themselves, then it would be completely different. It would be a civil discourse. It would be honest and truthful. This is the problem we face. You know, I know I'm not sort of being critical for Beth because she runs a great show and she has good ads and it's probably a good business. But the thing is, I wish to heck there was one branch of it which could be, you know, okay, this branch on the right-hand side is people we know who they are and what they're saying, you know, so we know they have a face and a person behind it. And this face, you can say what you damn well want and try and get away with it because you know, no one knows who you are. And then we'd know. And then you know, Beth herself could literally write the news and nothing but the news without any of her comments or characterizations of people or how they say it, but just act as a neutral reporter like the New York Times and let the comments come from the public. But I suggest you split it into two, the anonymous bunch of nobodies and the people who are willing to own up to who they are. Thank you.
Who do you want next? Oh, Mr. Wood.
I'm usually at the end. So,
You won't be.
I admit I really don't read the comments on the blog that much. I do read the stories. Once in a while, I do read the comments, and some of them, the tone's almost borderline cyberbullying. On the Public Safety Committee, when we did that, we had a section for frequently asked questions. We got over 150 questions on that we could answer. If we could have something like that on the website, that people would not be able to ask their questions or post their comments anonymously, if they're willing to post their names, I think that would be helpful.
Mr. Stavis.
Thanks. I think it's a great question. I think that many other towns actually have to have the same issue, and my bet is if we looked around, we could find some solutions. I'd remind folks that we actually voted at the recent town meeting to form a municipal technology committee. That draws on expertise from technology-related people all over town, and my bet is that if somebody started looking in that direction, somebody could find some solutions to that, maybe as has been suggested here. I'd also remind people that must have been a year or so ago, the selectmen actually were considering a policy that would allow residents to email questions to the town administrator during selectmen's meetings. The town administrator would review those questions and things that he thought were useful to get into the dialogue. He would raise for the selectmen to discuss at that meeting, sort of like an extended public comment. I thought that was a pretty good idea. It went nowhere, and if I'm elected, I'm going to try to open up something like that to create another channel for the public to input, and maybe we won't get much, but I think it's worth a try to encourage public participation. Thank you.
Mr. Calenda, you have not spoken.
I did earlier.
You did.
We have our 30 seconds.
Who has
I
not?
haven't spoken yet.
Okay, Ms. Bratcher, yeah.
Great, thank you very much. I also think that this is a concern, and this leads to wanting to create a better process for the citizens to be able to have access to the selectmen and get some answers to their questions. Obviously, the selectman's job is to do what's best for the town. The town administrator's job is that as well. So some people may say this is a trivial question, but I don't. I think our town is best served when our citizens have a voice and our citizens have a say in what's going on. How to achieve this? The blog is a great place. Yes, I agree. I agree somewhat with, well, I agree with what Sam said about having an ability to do that. But it's drawing on the expertise of the citizens we have in this town, in this field, to come up with the best way. Not that I want to add all these committees or anything else, that's not what I'm suggesting, but to have the opportunity to get input, to find the best way so people can feel like they're a part of your town government, your voice is heard, whether the selectmen acknowledge you or don't acknowledge you or whatnot. You should always have some type of track to the selectmen, and that is no slight on the current selectmen in any way. This is just a new process that, if I'm elected, that I would like to see instituted. Thank you.
Mr. Kalenda.
Thank you, sir. So I do think these are great opportunities. They are also some, we have to be very careful about too often what we see on social media. I was shocked at some of the things I heard just from some of these comments about purported, no need for anonymity, good word, when some of the things that happened to me, which in my effort to spread good cheer, I'm not going to bring up tonight, but feel free to research on mysouthborough.com what happened to me when I was serving in the Congo 3 years ago, and some awful things were stated about me and my purported volunteers who put up signs, and then people going on to the blog and saying, take Kalenda's signs and throw them in the trash. Who does he think he is? It was horrific. And it was by an anonymous person who when I got back, I knew exactly who it was. So I strongly encourage anyone who wants to do a little research on that issue, my position and who that individual is, you will be interested to know. And we have to be very careful about things like that happen. My wife, my son, who never go on to blogs, heard about it, and they went on there under their own names and defended their father while I was overseas serving. It is awful, some of the things that some people behind a keyboard choose to say about others. And I would encourage any kind of chat room. That's wonderful. I would strongly encourage people, please use your name. If you don't, that's okay too, but please, keep your comments honest and respectful of others. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Kate.
Yes, hi, Kate Burke, 14 Birchwood Drive. I have a question for the candidates for when you're elected. My question is, what do you see is going to be the biggest challenge for the building of the new public safety building on the St. Mark's Golf Course? Thank you. And that's for each of the candidates.
Okay. Let me start with Mr. Parry.
What's the biggest challenge in building it? Well, the biggest challenge is next Tuesday, voting of the 2.5. We better vote the 2.5 override so we get the money to build it. That's the first challenge. Everyone in this room better vote for this, because this is one of the best projects in my experience, 35 or whatever many years I've lived here. This is one of the single most creative projects I've ever been involved in. A team playing which really, really worked. And it's not a single loser. St. Mark's, wins, Lattisquamba Road wins, Woodward School wins with a new loop road, we get a public safety building, and we get a golf course forever. And by the way, I would remind you that I was the person who put in the article for conservation restrictions, forever. So we bought that golf course forever. In fact, the moderator here, Mr. Wilson, when he was presenting, he said, I'd like to play for another, I think this is factual, John, another 10, 20 yeyears. Could we keep it that way, please? So I came up to him after and said, no, John, I'm on board if it's forever, but not 10, 20 years, because this is a jewel.
I was talking about me, not the golf course.
Well, exactly, and that's the whole point. And I was talking about us, the town, forever, because I want people in 100 years' time to look back on us and say, they did work hard, and they saved the character of this town forever. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Wood.
I think the hardest part for the public safety building is going to be maintaining the golf course during construction, to be honest. I think that the building of the safety building is going to go relatively smooth. I think the committee that we've established for it has worked very, very well together, and I think we'll continue to. I think if we can get a couple more people on the committee with relative building expenses, building experience, that we could keep the expenses down. I think that we can probably come under budget on that, and at least by our contingency, which is about $2 million, if we work hard and give good oversight on it. I don't think the building itself is going to be a big problem. The hardest part is, like Mr. Barry said, getting it through on Tuesday at the ballot. I'd like to see that happen. But the committee we got, we're strong. I think we can get that done relatively easy. Again, the hardest part is going to be the golf course and moving the holes and try to keep it operational during construction. Other than that, I think it's going to go well. Thank you.
Mr. Stavis.
Thank you. I agree with Mr. Wood that there's certainly some construction management challenges, and I think it's critical that we get professional construction management help with this. This is a big project. This is not rocket science. People build these kind of things all the time, and all the time they go over budget because they aren't careful enough about it. But people know how to do this. We need to find people who do. I think the real challenge that's not so obvious is that we need to continue to think about this in a more holistic way, because we have the public safety building, we have the golf course, and part of the output from the St. Mark's Golf Course Master Plan Committee that I served on with Ms. Braccio and others came up with the concept of being able to utilize a small portion of the Woodward School space to increase the ability to move traffic through Woodward, to create a loop road there, and to, through that process, open up some additional playing field space in Woodward School, and then lay the groundwork for, if at some future point Woodward School becomes something else, to create the potential at least for getting access to it, etc. So I think we need to continue to think about all these things, and as we're constructing, we need to do things in the right sequence. So if you have the bulldozers in to do the public safety building thing, you have them do whatever shaping they need to do for the golf course and the loop road and everything else. So if you manage the whole thing as an integrated project, you're able to do it more efficiently, save a little money, and build in the things that you need for the next steps, as opposed to one piece at a time. And I've seen a lot of projects that have lost sight of that and created difficulties and expense to come back and fix later. So again, I think with the right professional help, we can do all of that very effectively, but I think it needs to be very thoughtful.
Ms. Braccio.
Thank you. I'll keep this answer short for me. I think we need to be fiscally responsible. That's the first thing. We need to do everything we can do to keep the costs within line and hopefully come in under budget, as Mr. Wood said. Also, I think one of the things we need to be very cognizant of is we need to be concerned about the impact to the neighbors surrounding the public safety building as it's going in as well. So it's kind of a twofold question. Obviously, the finance is a big part, the golf is a big part, but also we need to be cognizant of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Mr. Galenda.
So the Public Safety Study Committee was probably one of the best, if not the best, committee that I was honored to help put together. An incredible job, and Mr. Wood, thank you for your leadership on that committee. They did amazing work to bring us to where we're at today. One of the biggest challenges with any of these things, when you have an approximate $22 million project, is ensuring that it's done on time and on or under budget. So that's one of the biggest things that I want to see. I would love to see that committee that we had, and it'll likely change into its next phase. But hopefully, after next Tuesday, if everyone, the 90+% that came out to that special town meeting and voted in favor of our police and fire professionals and giving them the public safety facility that they deserve to do the work they do for all of us, if everyone comes out and votes yes for that, we'll be able to move forward quickly and rapidly with a new committee focused on then delivering one of the very, very best public safety complexes that this town can be proud of. Again, on time and hopefully under budget.
Mr. Barry.
Yes, sorry. I was speaking very generally, wasn't I, when I addressed that question, but I want to be more specific now on a very important issue. The golf course cannot survive as a golf course if it's closed for more than 1 year. That is the critical issue. here, and it can be done, but we cannot afford, because we were told by Brian Silver, the gentleman who's an world expert golf designer, you cannot afford to close this for more than a year, otherwise the teams will leave, they'll move elsewhere, their loyalties will move elsewhere. You've got to do it in 1 year. Everything on the golf course has to be done in 1 year, and it can be done, because just as my colleagues here have said, the bulldozers can deal with all the stuff on the golf course in 1 year. The septic, the drainage, the whatever it is, the pipes, and get that all out of the way, and then fence off all the work which has to go on with the hard construction to the police fire north of there, fence it off, screen it off with a big, tall, 12-foot high screening fence, and have a temporary parking lot. For instance, one of the New England golf people have suggested use the existing parking lot for golf. The southern area of that is brush. If you've ever played golf there, it's part of it's paved and part of it's gravel. That could be used as a temporary parking lot for golf. Through the existing entrance. That could be a temporary existing entrance and parking for golf. So therefore golf, if we did all the groundwork, big heavy work, moving soil and everything else in year 1, and that could be used as a temporary entrance parking lot, the golf could be saved. This is absolutely critical, otherwise we're going to lose teams and we won't be able to make any money out of it. And of course it is a money-making operation. We could make, right now, St. Mark's makes $35,000 a year net profit after paying for employees and water and everything else.
Mr. Wood.
Real quick, just want to make a correction. I appreciate you saying under my leadership, but the first chair was Al Hamilton, and the second was Jason Malinowski, who did an unbelievable job. I just want to make sure people don't think that I was the leader of that public safety committee. And in regards to what Ms. Braccio said about working with the Lattisquama residents and the abutters, we did that. We had 51 posted meetings, and it was attended pretty well by a lot of different Lattisquama residents who came out, and we listened to their input, and we tried to accommodate anything we could, and we'll continue to. Thank you.
Okay. Sally?
Well, Sally Waters, 17 Wood Street. I hate to have Park Central rear its ugly head again, but I do have a question for Mr. Stivers. Are you a party to the petitions, lawsuits, or ethics complaints that have arisen surrounding the Park Central project?
Simple answer is no. I didn't sign the petitions. I'm not a party to any legal action. I actually have never spoken to the attorney or met the attorney involved in that process. I'm not part of any of that process. Thank you.
Joe.
Anonymous nobody here. Joe Cruciani, 53 School Street. Fayetteville Hall, that was another hot topic at our recent town meeting. We passed an article which basically allowed the Board of Selectmen to pursue selling that. There was an attempt to, I guess, wrangle and tie your hands a little bit with having to sell it with the outside preserved, but that motion failed. As selectmen, will you pursue trying to sell that building with the outside preserved and use that adapt and reuse policy that we also passed at town meeting?
Okay.
I got a quick answer.
Okay, Mr. Stivers.
Yes.
Ms. Braccio?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Calenda? Mr. Calenda?
So yes, I think it's a great question, and it's one of the reasons that we worked with the Historical Commission to bring up other articles, and we wanted to ensure that the adaptive reuse article came up first to hopefully see that pass, because that's another avenue that could be of great benefit to Fayetteville Hall. We also all publicly pledged it is solely our goal to ensure that the next buyer of that is someone that will maintain the facade of that property. I think that it would be the very best thing for the town of Southborough.
Mr. Barry?
Well, interesting enough, it's not a question of, if, it's a question of they're going to have to follow the adaptive reuse bylaw, because that is the only way that this building can be reused. It's going to have to be a single-family house, otherwise it's in a residential B zone. So without the adaptive reuse bylaw, it cannot be reused for anything else other than a single-family home, which is obviously ridiculous. But let's go back to town meeting. So, so that just shows that we need the adaptive reuse bylaw for Fayville Hall. That was one of the key points, so it can be used for restaurants, offices, and et cetera, But the key point, saving the exterior, I was very disappointed with our town meeting here, because, but where's the fault there? We didn't think through that article before it was put up. Or rather, the selectmen didn't think through it carefully enough, because it should have been worded, in my opinion, that, are you voting to surplus this building with preservation restrictions on the facade? That's how it should have been worded, so we had that knowledge up front, because here's the building which royally deserves to be, and deserves to be preserved. It's a significant building, for heaven's sake, and Fayville is owed its due. Why on earth would we preserve, a house down West Main Street, not preserve Fayville? And is that a constraint to the buyer? Not at all. There are hundreds of buyers who are buying these old buildings with preservation restrictions on the facade. It's kind of like incentive for them, because it's historic, for heaven's sake. It increases the value of the building. We should have put that right there, from day one, and they know that is a binding restriction on them. They're going to have. And why is that important?
20 seconds.
Because, as Mr. Weishans said, if you have a preservation restriction on a building, it flows over to the next owner, and the next owner, and the next owner in perpetuity. And that's a building which deserves to be preserved. So, we missed it. We just didn't do that because, as you know, it was brought up halfway through. My John Butler was thinking really hard, and we didn't think it through.
Yes, Mr. Wood has another comment.
It's too bad we didn't preserve it in 1999 when we bought the land that I used to live at 40 Central Street, and put the septic in then. Back then, it was a very restorable building. Now, it's tough, but I'd like to see the outside stay. But if the selectmen back in the 90s were able to actually put the septic there, it would have been handy.
Mr. Kalunda?
So it may shock some at this table that the Board of Selectmen actually did its homework in advance of this particular article. And we have an obligation, anyone who assumes this role has an obligation to the entirety of the town. And part of that is fiscal responsibility for the assets that are under our control. So if we were to put that kind of restriction up front in writing, that may very well, it might limit our ability to sell to a potential owner. We would then likely incur substantial additional liability to the town that you, the taxpayers, everyone sitting in this room, is going to have to pay for. So we didn't put that restriction on there, but we all pledged, and as part of the RFP process, all want to see what buyers we get first that'll solely maintain that facade. That is our goal, and that is our publicly stated goal. So, but we didn't want to hamstring the taxpayers of the town of Massachusetts by putting on that restriction in advance today.
Ms. Morrow?
Hi, Rose Morrow, 6 Winchester Street. This is an optional question and can be answered by anything from none to all of you in case whichever has an interest. When our kids go out to work, kids that are alive now, things are going to look very different demographically. And, this is just Massachusetts, people under 18, 33 won't be white, 28 are from immigrant families, 14% have low-income working parents, 32% rent, don't own, and this one really surprised me, 22% don't speak English at home. So just a question, in your experience, do you agree that it's good to learn to work with all different kinds of people? And should Southborough be thinking now, before this demographic transition happens, about just making sure we present ourselves as a welcoming community?
Who wants to go first? Mr. Barrett.
Of course we should. God, I go knocking on doors to get permissions for signs, and who opens the door? It's an Asian Indian, or it's a South Malayan, or it's a Nigerian. You know, and what are they doing? They're doing computer science. They're working with EMC. You know, they're brilliant people. You know, I was born in India too, actually, so I'm Indian technically. I was born in Darjeeling, India. So it's the first thing I say, oh, welcome, I'm Indian too. You know, you're part of America. This is America. We're all from somewhere, aren't we? So of course we should welcome all these people. And yes, it's going to change. And of course, yes, they'll all speak English before long, just like many of our ancestors spoke Timbuktu language or whatever.
That's a tough one to follow. Absolutely. All four of my grandparents were immigrants from Ireland. So yeah, we should be welcoming. I think Southborough right now does a pretty good job. And when you're talking with the schools, we have all sorts of inclusion for different language speaking students and stuff. They're doing a great job. I think we're actually ahead of the curve than some communities. So yes, absolutely.
Mr. Stavers.
Second, what Mr. Wood said, it is reality, and I think we need to deal with it, and I think we need to plan for it. And I've been, last several years, the advisory committee's liaison to the school department for budget purposes. And I am impressed with the work the school committees have been doing in terms of dealing with a wide variety of backgrounds of children that come into the schools. And so I think we obviously need to continue to support that, and I think that's a good way to help integrate folks into the community. But I think there are a lot more we can do if we plan for it more specifically.
Ms. Burchell?
Thank you. I think our community is only served better by the diversity that it houses. And do I think Southborough does enough? I think Southborough does a lot. I think a lot of people feel very welcome here. We've seen the participation in our town meetings. I don't, through the schools even, I don't think there's any neglect, if I can use that word. Do I think that going forward is that a dynamics change? Absolutely. Anything in life, you have to kind of adjust as things go. But I think at this point the town does a very good job, and I think the town is very welcoming to people, and that's one of the things I personally love the most about Southborough. I'm from a diverse background myself. You know, as John said, 3 of my grandparents were immigrants, and my grandmother came right from the reservation. So I appreciate the welcoming and the diversity in Southborough. Thank you.
Mr. Kalenda.
Thank you, Rose, for the question. I think it's a great one. And yes, you know, we have a responsibility to all of our residents. And I want to see, you know, diversity only can strengthen us. So we see it in my company, CA Technologies. It's around 11,000 people strong worldwide. And one of our greatest benefits is our great diversity. Same thing in our military. We have a wide variety of diversity in our military. It's one of our strengths. We take it with us when we go to serve overseas as well. So I think it's something that we need to continually encourage. I think one of our greatest responsibilities as public servants is in defense of the defenseless, and too often members of any immigrant community may feel like they don't have a voice and are and could be defenseless. And I think we have an obligation to make sure they are heard.
Thank you.
And welcomed. Thank you, Rose.
Let me just say, after Mrs. Shimkus's question, if there are no more questions, we go to final statements. But then I am going to use my little opportunity up here to ask the unopposed candidates a question. So if you're an unopposed candidate, brace yourself for my question. Mrs. Shimkus.
Karen Hinman Shimkus, Lindbergh Road. Can you hear me? Is that
No, you're going to get
closer?
That's it.
Thank you. My husband Peter and I have lived in town for a very long time. My husband was born here, and we're second generation family. My brother-in-law ran faith school for many years with my sister-in-law Maggie, and we have deep roots here. I love the community very much and care about it, and it has taken a certain amount of bravery and courage to face issues of late. The thing most troubling to me has been the stifling of opposing opinions in public meetings. And there is, I have to tell you, a climate of fear and retaliation. You know, if you give an opinion,
it's a democracy. You shouldn't be subject to open hostility or some political spin or threatening rhetoric. With regard to Park Central,
There's 20 seconds left on the question.
that issue has been grossly mischaracterized as not liking the answer of the board or its decision, when in fact that's not it at all. According to top legal experts in the state, the ZBA screwed up. No quorum means no permits. There was no meeting, there was no permits, allegedly, but it's in the courts and we'll see what comes out of it. So the question is, and I have a follow-up question if I could, would you what would you do to promote better policy and procedures in terms of education, continuing education? And I'm sorry, this question is directed toward the people who have not been a Board of Selectmen, just in the interest of time, because I'm less familiar with your opinions. But what would you do to introduce better policies and procedures on education for the ZBA and for the Planning Board?
Okay, better policies and procedures. Mr. Barry.
Well, first of all, the ZBA better learn that, what it takes to get a variance or a special permit. It must have something to do with the soil, topography, or shape of the lot. It has nothing to do with making a profit. And every time you watch TV, and you watch them, it's always a question, oh, I can't make a profit if I do that, or I need to move it closer to there because then I can make more money. It has nothing to do with money or profit. It has to do with what is unique about that property which deserves a variance. It has something to do with the soil, the topography, or the shape of the lot. And I swear to God, if many of these permits were appealed, they would be denied by the courts because they're illegal. Illegal. That's what a variance requires. A special permit's entirely different. Special permit is no detriment. There's words beyond that, however. Not causing a decline in property values, for instance. There are very specific things in the bylaw and state law which you must uphold in order to give a special permit. No decline in property values, no detriment. I can't remember the other ones, but they're written down. And the first thing I think the ZBA, everyone, it's very difficult being a ZBA member. I sympathize with the gigantic problem they have, a headache, really a huge headache, and all the responsibility falls on them. So that, I hope they can go to increasing, whatever it's called, adult education classes on what a ZBA's rules of procedure must be. They're bound by these rules. It's not a question of what you want to do, it's what you have to do, what you can do. Thank you.
Anybody? Mr. Stardust.
Mr. Wood. Sorry to go down this way then. I don't know enough about what the ZBA does, to be honest. I'm not going to pretend that I do, but I will find out, get back to you by Monday. But I was a paramedic for 25 years, and we had to do continuing education, and teachers have to do con eds, and Mr. Haggerty does a good job sending out all sorts of different classes and things like that. So I'd probably try to find out if there was such con eds available, but again, I don't know enough about it to really speak, but I promise I will get back to you if you want to.
Mr. Stardust.
As one who spent 7 years on the ZBA, I can answer that. It is a challenge. It's not impossible by any means. I think that there are continuing education courses. I attended lots of them when I was on the ZBA, encouraged my colleagues to do so. There are many towns that actually require one of two things, either professional credentials in a particular permitting area, whether if you're on the planning board, if you're a professional planner, you qualify. If you're on the zoning board, if you're an attorney, presumably you've got the skills to be able to deal with the zoning laws. If you're on the conservation commission, if you're, for example, soil scientist or something like that. But if you don't have those skills, and I think it's important to leave an opportunity for people without the technical background necessarily to get the diversity on these boards that you need, there are continuing education courses for all of these programs. And many towns require folks folks who don't have the a priori professional credentials to go to some number of those per year. And in fact, I'd suggested that a number of times when I was on the zoning board to make that a requirement for the appointment, and the selectmen chose not to do that. I think that's something we ought to consider. And the counter argument is, well, you'll never get anybody to serve. On the other hand, would we rather have somebody who actually has some background and training in this, and you can learn a lot from these courses? I think that makes just good sense, and I think we ought to push to try to make that happen and find qualified candidates to serve on these boards. Thank you.
Ms. Braccio.
I agree with what Sam said, but I would also like to add, I believe that the opportunity should be made available through the town for members that sit on these very important boards and committees to be able to have the opportunity to do this. I know, as Mr. Wood referenced, Mr. Haggerty, as a poll worker here in town, we are constantly offered classes on how better to do our responsibilities to the town on election day. So I think would be in the best interest to have the opportunities there for the people that sit on these boards, and I'm sure they would certainly take advantage of it if it was available. Thank you.
Mr. Glenda.
I think it was just to the other four.
Oh, okay. You had a follow-up question.
Follow-up question. This is just generally speaking and not related.
On here, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Generally speaking and not related, but a follow-up question on, again, policy and procedure, conflicts of interest. I never really paid much attention to town politics. I've been a worker bee my whole life, and I'm troubled by conflicts of interest or potential conflicts of interest. In general, in any municipality, you don't want individuals on boards that represent possibly, construction trades or lawyers who may be benefiting financially from having some financial link to any developer in any community, from Boston on out. There could be, I could give an outlandish example, but say, you have the head of a board of a commission who may be doing legal work for the developer. That to me would pose probably a conflict. I ran off the town of Wilbraham volunteer policy, which I think we need a similar
You're going to have to go
policy.
straight to the question.
The question is again, on a policy and procedure, I would suggest that you don't need to spread good cheer. You need to spread education and more policies and specific policies and procedures. So the question to the candidates who have not been Board of Selectmen, just in the interest of time, what would you do specifically to help develop other, additional best practices, perhaps manuals, volunteer policy like the town of Wilbraham? Are there ideas or specific initiatives that you would have once you're in office? Thank you.
And you can answer this if you want to, Mr. Glenda.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Clearly, if there is a conflict of interest that colors negatively any decision that someone were to make, and so I think it is incumbent upon all board and committee members to ensure that they don't have, number one, a conflict of interest, or if they do, that they contact or if they think they do, they can contact what's called the attorney of the day at the State Ethics Commission and get a ruling as to whether or not they believe they may have a conflict, and if they do, they should recuse themselves from that issue. So, we had a recent issue at our last Board of Selectmen meeting that took probably about 45 minutes of good discussion about whether a current alternate member could sit on a matter that was dealing with Park Central. We didn't want that individual's opinion to be clouded or decision to be clouded in any way by what was a possible conflict of interest. So these are matters of great interest for boards and committees, and we take that job seriously as your Board of Selectmen.
Okay, Ms. Braccio.
Thank you. One of the things I would like to see happen is right on the volunteer form, when you apply for a position, you should have the opportunity, or the question should be asked of you, whether you have a conflict with the position that you're applying for. Also, I know the, you can, as Mr. Kalinda said, you can also call the state, but also there should be better availability to classes potentially. I know Mr. Haggerty's been very good about getting classes and offering them to the public as well as to people sitting on boards. So maybe we could work together to come up with a better plan to have better availability for new members coming on boards, to have the availability to sit through a class and actually hear from the experts, and also let them know that they can also reach out to the state as well. Thank you.
Mr. Stiles.
I agree with Ms. Braccio in that I think we could inquire more pointedly on the application forms. I actually have been through the process as a potential appointee a number of times. I can't ever recall having been asked during that process, do you have a conflict of interest? And I think we need to be a little more pointed in terms of the interview questions for those appointments.
Mr. Barry?
Well, I think the problem is that it's a human problem. You know, when you're on a board and a really critical issue which really interests you comes up, it's just so, the temptation to get involved is extreme. You know about it, you want to get involved, you have these strong opinions about it, and so you're naturally, you want to participate, but you mustn't participate. And you just have to, just like Mr. Kalinda says, it can't be any gray area here. You just have to not participate and not even to enter the room. And that's just life. It's difficult, but sometimes when you want to participate, you can't. You just mustn't. Not even entering the room. Thank you. And by the way, I should say, I'm an architect and a city planner, but I've never had a client in Southborough, and I've never had a builder in Southborough, because I want to avoid any potential conflict of interest. Thank you.
Mr. Wood?
I actually know a lot about this. My wife is a town employee, so when I got on advisory back in 2010, they were aware of it. And there's actually, the lawyer of the day is quite handy. I have the ethics committee on speed dial, and they actually are pretty good. So when I first got on advisory, I had to fill out, I'm trying to remember the actual name of the form. I actually have it here, just in case anybody asked about it. There's disclosure forms, there's financial interest in particular matters, there's, what's the other one here? I apologize, there's lots, but as long as people are open about it, I agree that people should be asked when they get on a board or a committee, whether they have any potential conflicts of interest, and if so, disclose them. So there's lots of things that you can do, like my conflict of interest with my wife being employees. I won't be able to look at her salary line. I'd have to recuse myself of that, but that's really no difference than anything I've done on the advisory for the last 7 years. Anything to do with her boss directly, I wouldn't be able to deal with it, because that could be considered financial gain if her boss was being hired or fired. But that's the town administrator, assistant town administrator, the other departments are far enough removed. So I figured I'd throw that out there. So my disclaimer's out there. If anybody has any questions, I have everything from the state with me, and I'd be happy to go through it with them.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we have two more questioners, then let's limit it to that. We'll go to the final statements, and then I will use the prerogative as the moderator to ask the unopposed candidates a couple of questions.
Yes, sir. John Green, 10 Tower Road. Everybody hear me?
Yes.
I think some of the challenges we've seen over the last couple of years have been, the ability to communicate with the Board of Selectmen as well as the Board of Selectmen communicating with us. Not just that, but I think the disconnect between the boards within town, and if we want to use Park Central as a example, providing 17 of 21 waivers, making sure that the planning board can't review a plan, allowing for a use variance to happen at 11 o'clock at night that has nothing in it, and we're going to put language in it the next day. I think that this is extremely disturbing. I noticed recently that the ZBA was actually moved to the senior center from the townhouse. I think that creates even more of a disconnect between these boards, and I'd like to know from this panel what you would do to improve the communication between the groups so that we don't have these types of things happen. Thank you.
We're not taking any more questions.
Okay.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Sorry, the building department.
Anybody want to answer that?
I'll take
Mr.
it.
Wood?
It's in front of me. I'll take it. When I first started chairing advisory, there was a meeting with some of the schools, the Treasury Department, the treasurer collector, and some other people. And they'd meet every now and again to discuss it. I think it would be wise for the town to have better communication between the committees. I think it would be great to have, even if it's a quarterly meeting or a monthly meeting for an hour or two, just to say, hey, what's going on with your committee? This is what we need, this is what we need, this is what we're doing. I don't think that ever hurts. Communication's awesome. Again, I hate to keep going back to public safety, but that was the smoothest thing I've ever worked on in this town. It was great. Everybody talked to everybody, and it moved forward. And most people, I'm not going to say everybody was happy, but most people were happy with the outcome. So that's a win. So I agree, there should be more communication. I think if they met monthly, quarterly, or with either the chairs or designated members, I think that would work out pretty good. Thank you.
Anybody? Mr. Perry?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's either a generalized question or it's a specific one. But let's deal with a specific issue. Park Central, this disaster we have. I mean, there, it's just so unfortunate what happened, with the ZBA, 3 members, they're only left with 3, so you all have to agree, don't you? Because you need 3 to pass it or disapprove it. So they all had to agree, and there they were, overriding all the 40A rules and bypassing the planning board. I mean, I won't use the word deliberately, but they were determined to get it through. Obviously, they believed it was the right thing to do. So I'm not going to be critical of them. They believed it was the right thing to do, but as a consequence, they didn't have any communication with the planning board. It was kind of like deliberately avoid discussing it with the planning board, which it's not any improper. It's just an insult, frankly, to the planning board, to the elected officials. There should have been more communication. And there's nothing to stop it, but you're getting into this sort of, of course they were, why did they do this? Because they're driven by the developer's attorney. Make up your damn minds, because I'm only going to give you 30 days more. So this is always pressure coming down. It makes it bloody difficult when you're on the ZBA, when you only have 30 days, So, but the boards just have to act more strongly against applicants. That's what it should have been. The ZBA said, well, screw you. I mean, we're not going to make a decision in 30 days. We're going to take 90 days, like the planning board does. They say, not good enough. We're not going to take our sweet time to do this project properly and on our own time. And we're going to talk to the planning board about it during the thing, and whether you like it or not. That's what should have happened, but they didn't. They caved to the...
Okay. We're kind of moving into, we'll get the rest of the questions, but criticizing Mr. Barry, the boards, I know what you're saying, but people are not here to defend themselves on some of those things, so we'll move on.
Thanks.
Mr. Stivers.
Regardless of what anybody thinks about Park Central, I don't think we're here to replay that at this point. I think Mr. Green asks a good question. I think there's several levels you deal with this on. One is, I think we actually have some very effective administrators for the various planning boards, various boards, planning, conservation, health, zoning. And I think a lot of real work, is sort of like the congressional aid theory, a lot of real work happens at the administrative level. I think those folks generally communicate fairly well with one another, and I think we ought to encourage that to happen in terms of particular applications to make sure that at least generally they can inform their boards about what's going on. Town planner plays a key role. There's a problem a little bit in the sense that the planning board is elected, Board of Health is elected, and so to get elected boards and appointed boards together, the selectmen don't have the direct authority to say, sit down and work this out. But I think the selectmen can play a more active role through the town administrator of pushing for coordination on these things. I personally think the move of the building department to the senior center was a mistake. I think that it's good to have people who work on the same things in physical proximity so they can run into each other in the hall and talk about things, etc. So I'd like to see actually the Board of Health get back over there with them too. I don't think we have the space to do it right now, but I think long term it's great to have people who are working on the same things physically fairly close so you get some of those informal interactions. So I think those are the kind of things we can do to encourage more coordination. Also providing a little stronger oversight from town council in some of this process, which some of them tend to be very legal. And I think that that got a little disconnected historically. So I think that that's a way that we can reinforce permitting consistency there.
Ms. Bradshaw.
From my time sitting on boards here in town, I found a lot of times the inner communications between the boards, you find that people are working in a silo fashion. We all tend to be working towards the same things, but in a very different manner. So I think you've heard some really great suggestions here tonight, Mr. Woods and Mr. Stivers as well. I agree with those suggestions. I think the committee, commissions, boards, and the Board of Selectmen need to be more involved in on a reoccurring basis to have everybody come together and sit down and see what we can do better to better serve the town. Thank you.
Mr. Glenn.
Thank you, John, for the question. I think it's a great one. So we can solve a lot more with more collaboration than less, and I think that's you've hit on the issue of our town right now. We have to be mindful of there are elected boards, there are some that are appointed. We have to be also respectful of the obligation and the duties of those boards, and to ensure that there's not undue influence from, say, for instance, an appointing board against a member that they appointed. They have autonomy to do their job as they see fit, and if they don't do it well, then they should be not reappointed. So one of the great things that I think we have done is we have liaisons from our board to other committees. I'm the liaison for the Board of Selectmen to the Economic Development Committee. We have meetings at least monthly, if not twice a month, at 7:45 in the morning. We had one, it was just this morning. So it's been a long day. That offers opportunity for greater collaboration so that this board understands what that committee is doing and vice versa. I think if planning, in fact, I encouraged it in public meetings, a much better communication, much more collaboration between planning and ZBA. I think if that were to happen, we may not be where we are today. I don't know that, but I do know that's something that we absolutely should be encouraging going forward. So the issues that transpired over the last number of years that you and so many others have, how many meetings have you been? You don't have to answer questions. I know you've been to a lot. And I think if we work more collaboratively together, there's greater opportunity to avoid the very issues that you and many residents are seeing today.
Mr. Nicholson.
Craig Nicholson, 30 Pinecone Lane. From each of you, I'd like to ask what your primary, most desired objective to accomplish in your term as an elected selectman over the next 3 years. What's your main goal? If you could accomplish just one thing in the next 3 years, what would you want it to be?
Let's start down at the end with Mr. Wood. Work our way up.
Although I'm a huge supporter of the public safety building, that would be not my number one. I'd like to see us try to get more commercial growth on Route 9, trying to offset some of the residential taxes. How I'm going to do that, I haven't quite figured it all out yet, but I think working with the EDC and working with the town administrator and local businesses trying to get it more filled in, I think it would be beneficial to the town and help offset. It won't lower taxes, I understand that, but it'll offset operational costs because businesses and seniors and people my age with the kids out of school, we're pennies on the dollar. So I'd like to make sure that we can keep people my age and up in town, try to get more business to stay in town, and incentivize them to stay and come. That would be my priority.
Mr. Barry.
Well, I assume this is within this 3 years, right? Is this what your question is? Okay, within this 3 years, because many of my objectives are very long range, and I mean 10, 20 years, like getting a bridge for Route 9 underneath Oak Hill and Central. That's a gigantic problem for this town, because Route 9 has become a blooming nightmare, hasn't it? 2-mile-long queues. There's an obvious solution there, Route 9 underneath Oak Hill and Central. Then you just got to figure out how to connect it. It can be done. But let's talk about that. Can't be done in 3 years. All you can do there is like go to the state and threaten them a little bit and say, what's in it for us, kind of thing. Quid pro quo. It's not the state doesn't govern Route 9. We govern it too. They need some things from us, and we can give things to them. So it's not impossible for us to do these things at all. But that's long range. Short range. 3 years. I want downtown to look magnificent. And I mean by that, the golf course solved, the public safety building built, Main Street done magnificently well, and the downtown block, which has been left out, the commercial block, dealt with in an incredibly creative way with real participation by the local businessmen, and they should decide how that block is determined. Not even the working group, a new working group for the downtown business block, with the businessmen deciding how that block should be done. And in my opinion, it should be done differently from the rest because it's a business block.
Mr. Staggers.
Hard to disagree with any of those comments, but I guess my service on the advisory committee colors my view of the world a little bit. I have a long list of things I'd like to be able to afford to spend to get built in the town. But I think that there's a real challenge in terms of strengthening the fiscal base, because advisory has done some studies to say that we're really walking a tightrope a little bit here in terms of our ability to raise tax revenue, given various state regulations on that, given the spending plans for public safety and other projects that are in the pipeline. So I think we need to think more creatively about finding new revenue sources particularly. I'll give you an example. Last fall I was at a workshop for the town finance committees one weekend, talking to somebody from one of the northern suburbs who said that they were surprised to see at one point that their tax revenues went up by nearly $1 million, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. Went out and took a look, and it turned out somebody had actually leased a sizable vacant office building in town and installed one of these server farms for cloud storage. So they had a big building full of very expensive computer equipment that got hit with the personal property taxes, and very few people, very little drain on public services, so it was a wonderful deal for the town. I think those kind of things are good examples of development that works both for the individual developer as well as for the town. I think the Economic Development Committee potentially plays a strong role in terms of helping find those kinds of sources of revenue for us, targeting some of the development activities, and improving our ability to generate tax revenue, as Mr. Wood suggests, in ways that are fairly cost effective for us. Now that's hard to do. There are not those deals out there, 10 a day that you can find. But I think if we're more focused, we can help find that. So thank you.
Ms. Braccio.
Thank you. Well, the public safety complex is obviously very important to me, but one of the things I want to work on mostly is the intercommunication between the boards and committees and the communication with you, the public. I think that's lacking at this point, and I think there's ways that we can do that better, and I think your town government best serves you when we are working cohesively together. Thank you.
Mr. Kalenda.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Nicholson. One of the reasons why I decided to run again is I have a passion for those who serve us, and our police and fire professionals have been working in squalor for way too long, and I was disgusted by it. Anyone who saw those facilities would readily come to the same conclusion. We had worked on that as a board for years, and it came to fruition at last special town meeting. I was nervous prior to that town meeting. I didn't know how that vote was going to go, all the work that had gone into that, all the incredible work by Mr. Rooney, by Mr. Shea in particular, to help get us to that point through their negotiations with St. Mark's, to come to a wonderful conclusion that passed by over 90% at what I believe is the largest town meeting on record, or at least one of them. So seeing that passed, I was relieved and thrilled. Now I want to see it through. So, I want to see it built. I want to see it built, and I want to see it built properly. So again, the men and women who serve us every day, who literally put their lives on the line for everyone in this room and our families, deserve that complex so they can perform their jobs, as best as they can. And I want to see that through.
Okay, we're going to final statements by the candidates. And again, following the final statements, if you would stay seated, and I'm just going to ask my little question. So let's start with, is anybody dying to go first? No. Okay, well, Mr. Barry.
Well,
As I say, I almost missed this. I was amazed by the number of cars. I've never seen so many cars here. It's incredible. Thank you all for coming. I mean, it's a really good participation. Participation, right? The key. So thank you all for coming, and thank you all for watching. I suppose some of the people are watching. It's been quite enjoyable to discuss these issues with a lot of agreement, you can see. And by the way, I'm not intending, when I was making those remarks, John, I wasn't intending to criticize the ZBA, but rather to explain the dilemma they face. It's an extremely difficult job they have, with deadlines and lawyers and God knows what. So no criticism intended, and if it was taken, I apologize for it. Now, if I'm a selectman, I'm going to be accessible at any time. I live here. I will devote most of my time to this job. I'm going to listen. I'm going to have a balanced approach to projects. I'm going to be fair. I'm going to put the town's interests first. I'm going to be transparent and open. And I want to have maximized resident participation, I said. And I will work hard for you. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Wood.
Okay. First off, thank you all for not embarrassing me too much when I turned into Bobby Brady looking at the camera earlier and froze. I will be at the transfer station this weekend, and I can give you that page that I was trying to read that I probably should have put bigger fonts. I just want to say this has been probably the most humbling experience of my life, and I'd like to thank my family and my friends that have supported me. This has been awesome. And if you haven't, this is my first run at election in case you can't tell. So if you haven't done it, you should. You should volunteer. It's pretty cool. So that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Stivers.
I'd second Mr. Wood's comment that there's a lot of talent in this town. If you look at the town census in terms of the jobs that people have, it's pretty impressive, and I think it's a little disappointing that we can't get more of that talent into town government, because I think it's a very rewarding job, and I think that it's something that can be very helpful to fellow citizens. I would appreciate the opportunity to serve the town as a selectman. I think I've got the right skills to be very helpful in terms of a lot of the management challenges that face us going forward. And I think my record shows that I work hard at listening to the concerns of the public, and I would certainly continue that effort going forward. Thank you.
Ms. Bradshaw.
Thank you. As a 16-year resident of Southborough, I've seen a lot of changes over that time in the political climate, how we speak to each other, how we speak with the boards and committees, and the frustration and mistrust some of our citizens feel towards our town government. During the public safety meetings, I heard repeatedly that there was no other forum for citizens to be heard or questions to be answered on how the project evolved. I believe as selectman I can improve on that situation on going forward on future projects. As elected officials, we work for you, the taxpayer. While you may not always disagree with the decisions that we make, you should always walk away from any dialogue with your elected officials feeling respected, acknowledged, and heard. I will bring a positive change to that process by establishing better lines of communication between town boards and town residents and our Board of Selectmen. This also applies to intercommittee board communications. Important decisions are being made with input, important decisions need to be made, with input and knowledge from all relevant boards and entities to implement processes that are fair and better serve all facets of our community. Our town is better served when you're working cohesively together. I've collaborated with the Planning Board, Conservation Commission, and the Recreation Commission. Thank you to my husband, Matt, for being here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight, and I hope to support me on May 9th. Thank you.
Mr. Kalenda.
Thank you. As I said at the beginning, I'm thrilled by the turnout here tonight. It's one of the reasons why I serve is I see the great outpouring of interest in our community. I saw what happened at special town meeting with upwards of 900 people coming. It's one of the reasons why I want to see that as the Public Safety Committee as well as Main Street through. I asked for your vote on Tuesday, May 9th, but more than that, I ask you to vote. While I care about the result of this election, honestly, what I care about is I'm thrilled that we have lots of candidates, that we have a debate tonight.
20 seconds.
And I'm thrilled for the opportunity to again be one of those. I won't be here on election night. I'll be far away, but I'm quite sure I'll hear the results. And again, I care more that you go out and vote and ask your neighbors and friends to go out and vote than any one particular candidate. So again, thank you for coming tonight.
Wait a minute.
Oh,
No, you finished.
special announcement.
I'm trying to run this.
Ryan, it's all yours. It's your library.
Okay. So, the rest won't take but a few more minutes. But these folks up here in a minute should get a big round of applause. However, they should not, you can see the joy in their faces. They should not have all the fun. So I'm going to ask each one of our candidates in the uncontested races just to share in about 20 seconds why they think they can do a good job for the town, because we're all so proud of them that they're running for office even though they don't have opponents. So I'll start with the list, and crazily enough, the first name on the list is Paul Semino, who's running for moderator. So I will ask you to share with us your thoughts about, and you've had 4 hours to watch me, what are your thoughts about what it takes to be a great moderator, Mr. Semino?
Wow. Yeah, that's trouble. Yes, there are two parts to that answer. Okay, one is to get Brian to understand when and when not to. No, I'm kidding. 2 parts to the answer, I think, Mr. Wilson. The piece that's visible to you, obviously, is standing up at a podium like this in front of town meeting and running a good, efficient, substantive town meeting. For those of you that don't know, most of the answers are in this book, Town Meeting Time, and I walked it up here because it's actually on the shelf all the way in the back corner. For any one of you who may want to dig into it, but certainly by the time you see me again like this, I will have memorized this book. That's number one. But just as importantly, the moderator appoints three bodies in town: the advisory committee, the Public Works Planning Board, and the Personnel Board. Making sure we have good, robust membership on all 3 of those committees so that they can be as effective as possible on your behalf is also something I take very seriously. And between, as we have openings or as we move into terms that are coming to an end, I will be looking for and seeking out input from anybody who wishes to give it, including the current members of those bodies themselves. I think it's important to that overall process. So those would be the 2 parts of my answer. I think I probably went over 20 seconds. All right. Thank you. This is on behalf of all the unopposed candidates. Please actually fill in the circle, because if nothing else, we feel a little bit better when the election returns come out and 2 of these people got 900 votes each and we only got 135. So take the time to fill in that circle, unless of course you wish it was somebody else, and then do what you have to do. Thank you.
So I don't know how many other candidates are here in uncontested races. I don't think Thomas Beaumont is here. Is Thomas here? No. Okay. Bill Boland is running for the Board of Commissioners of Trust Funds. Do you want to give us a word of wisdom on that, Mr. Boland?
The Board of Commissioner of Trust Funds are 3 elected people: Mr. Wilson, myself, Nick McCoy, right? And what we do is the town has several, probably about a dozen or so trust funds established over many years. The most popular, or one with the most money, is called the Waldo Fay Fund. Each one has specific uses for helping the needy in town. And what we do is we set aside about a certain amount of money every year to help people with paying their fuel bills, paying their electric bills, and paying other things. And it's hard for some people to come out and say they're going to turn off my electricity. We look for people that are needy, not just somebody that is looking for a handout, whatever else. And believe it or not, there are a lot of people in town that do that. We work very closely with Youth and Family Services and with the Senior Center. So if you know anyone that runs into some trouble, please have them get in contact with Brian Ballantyne, the finance director, and have them come see us, because we have funds available for the people that really get into trouble. So thanks.
Thank you. Is Nancy Sacco here?
No.
Okay, Nancy's not here. Jane Davis, running for the library trustees. Jane, you want to come up? So the question is, what makes a successful library trustee? Well, tell them whatever you want.
I think a successful library trustee is one that cares greatly about the library and understands the multitude of uses the library serves in our community. I've lived here for 23 years, and one of my first contacts with other neighbors and still friends was through this library's story hour. I've been a volunteer and a patron, and I'd like to do my part in making sure this institution is well cared for and used for other purposes other than just books and lending.
Amy Vacras. Yes, Amy.
Thank you. I'm Amy Vacras. I'm a 7-year resident of Southborough here. I come from a small town in southern Maine that's a lot like Southborough, and there the library was always one of my favorite places, and it remains so here. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity to give back and to make this continue to be a really vibrant place in this community. Thanks.
Is Paul Desmond still here? There you are, okay. This will kill two birds with one stone, right? You're running unopposed twice.
That's right. Thank you. I'm Paul Desmond. I'm a glutton for punishment, I guess. I'm running for both the K through 8 and the regional school committees. I moved into town in 2004. I had two, actually just one kid, and one of them had yet to be born. So 6 years ago, I ran for a K through 8 school committee for the first time, mainly just because I wanted to see the schools stay in the good shape that they were already in. I mean, it was a big reason I moved into town, as I think it is for a lot of people, so I just wanted to make sure the schools stayed in good shape. And so now 6 years later, I think I actually know what I'm doing, at least a little bit, so I think I'll be more effective at that job now. And now those kids are in 6th and 8th grade, so one of them's going to the high school, so I thought it was a good time to take on the regional school committee position and hopefully transfer some of the institutional knowledge that I've gained on the K through 8 to the region. So I'd, as Paul Semino said, I hope you fill in that blank. Take the time. It does make us feel better.
For the school committee, Keturah Martin. Yes, come on up.
So I've been in town about 5 years, and I have a first grader and twins who will be going to Finn a year from the fall. And I heard through the grapevine that there may be an opening on the school committee, and decided to step up and do it. It's my first venture into town politics. I'm really excited to do it. My background is as a lawyer. I was a practicing lawyer for about 9 years. Before that, I was a human resources director, and I hope that I have some things to bring to the committee and contribute. I'm excited to do it.
Paul Budka. Paul was here earlier. Okay, you have to leave. Okay, that's it. Ryan has a few words to say, and then we'll give our candidates another great round of applause. And Betsy, Nicole for helping out on the time clock over there.
Hi everyone, I'm Ryan Donovan. I'm the library director. I just want to give a few quick thank yous, in particular to Betsy Rosenblum, Jane Smith, and Marguerite Landry, two are former trustees. One is a current trustee, but without their help, we could not have had this great event tonight. So just give them a quick round of applause if that's okay. And thank you all for coming. I mean, this is great. I wish we had this many people for every library event, hint. So thank you for coming, and have a great night.
Just one more round of applause. When you run for office, you can often wind up working a lot more than you thought you had to. You can make enemies, and it's not easy sometimes. So I'm very proud of all of these candidates. Please join me in a round of applause.